Would you believe me when I say that there is a great struggle for survival in the whole world? There is still a war going on in the planet Earth. Due to the war, many people are forced to leave their homes, cities and streets are in an unrecognizable state. Meanwhile, political migrants are increasing all over the world, and natural disasters are a completely different matter. Now floods and forest fires continue. Between 2016 and 2021, 43 million children became migrants due to drought in Africa. Migrants are increasing as African families seek food, water and better living conditions. Now imagine that today's natural disasters are unpreventable. Floods, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and in the world's most powerful countries there is a disaster capable of destroying the planet. The Earth may become completely unusable, and then the number of ecological and political migrants in the whole world will reach 1 billion. Well, will mankind become a space migrant looking for other planets in the universe? Today we will talk with you about moving to the planet Mars. The Saturn V rocket that took the first man into space, the information that is hard for you to believe, the first picture of Mars, the first ever spacecraft created in the history of mankind took a picture of the planet Mars. The question is, how do you think this picture came to Earth? In the form of numbers, each mathematical number represents a certain color. If you just run it through a decoder, you'll know what colors those numbers represent, but scientists were so eager to see the first image of Mars that they didn't even use a decoder to convert the numbers into pictures. They painted it themselves. Can you imagine that scientists thought that there is life on the planet Mars, but in this picture nothing was seen except 15 million kilometers of desert, only stones and sand. The question is why scientists believed that there is life on Mars. Because several groups of scientists discovered that there is a channel on Mars and then concluded that there is life on Mars. Because the element that creates all the signs of life is definitely water. Scientists were so interested that they even created an online map of Mars. The main reason for this is firstly interest, of course, and secondly, we've just passed 8 billion, and then there's the push to Mars, and that plan is under consideration. Mankind is experiencing technological development, science and medicine are developing, artificial intelligence is taking the place of man. It contributes to making life easier for mankind. Precisely because the conditions have improved, we have increased in number. 8 billion people, more than 2,000 nationalities, different worldviews and beliefs. We are all actively involved in destroying the planet without even knowing it. For example, you probably know better than me how long a piece of plastic will last without rotting. At this point, the question arises, is the Earth strong enough to hold 8 billion people? Are we ready for such serious changes in the next half-century, especially when climate change is happening all over the world? That's why humanity is thinking to move to another planet and survive. If you think that such ideas appeared not so long ago, you are wrong. For example, in 1865, Jules Verne's book, which put forward the ideas of going to space, was also filmed in 1902, based on this book. If there is a planet that is planned to transit, it is definitely Mars. Scientists are hard at work on these plans, and billionaires are actively betting. Mars is the fourth planet of the solar system in terms of distance from the Sun and the second smallest after Mercury. This planet is named after Mars, the god of war in ancient Roman mythology. Radius, 3,389.5 kilometers. Surface area, 144,400,000 square kilometers. Mass, 6.39 times 10 to the power of 23 kg, 0.107 m circle plus. Distance to the Sun, 227,900,000 kilometers. Free fall speed, 3.71 meters per square second. Has gold been found on Mars? Magnesium, aluminium, titanium, iron, and chromium are relatively common in them. In addition, lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, zinc, niobium, molybdenum, lanthanum, europium, tungsten, and gold have been found in trace amounts. Why is Mars called Mars? The Romans knew of 7 bright objects in the sky, the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 brightest planets. They named them after their most important gods. The Romans were great soldiers and thought Mars, the god of war, was very important. Mars, the red planet, was named after this god of war. Did Mars have water? Abundant water ice is also present beneath the permanent carbon dioxide ice cap at the Martian South Pole. More than 5 million cubic kilometers of ice have been detected at or near the surface of Mars, enough to cover the whole planet to a depth of 35 meters, 115 feet. Even more ice might be locked away in the deep subsurface. Who found Mars? Galileo Galilei. 1609, Galileo Galilei, 1564–1642, observes Mars with a primitive telescope, becoming the first person to use it for astronomical purposes. Does Mars have a blue sky? The color of the sky. The normal hue of the sky during the daytime can vary from a pinkish red to a yellow-brown, butterscotch color. However, in the vicinity of the setting or rising sun it is blue. This is the exact opposite of the situation on Earth. On Mars, Rayleigh scattering is usually a very small effect. Does Mars have clouds? Clouds are rare on Mars, since there isn't much water in the planet's atmosphere. Martian air has just 1% the density of Earth's atmosphere. When clouds do appear, it's mostly around the Martian equator during the coldest part of its year, when the planet's orbit takes it furthest from the Sun. Can plants grow on Mars? The plants would probably be housed in a greenhouse on a Martian base, because no known forms of life can survive direct exposure to the Martian surface, with its extremely cold, thin air and sterilizing radiation. Even then, conditions in a Martian greenhouse would be beyond what ordinary plants could stand. Does Mars have seasons? Mars has 4 seasons, roughly twice as long as those on Earth, but with more variation, given Mars' eccentric orbit and the fact its orbital speed varies more as a result, fastest when at perihelion, when it comes closest to the Sun, slowest at aphelion, its farthest point from the Sun. Is Mars hot or cold? Cold. Mars may look hot, but don't let its color fool you. Mars is actually pretty cold. In orbit, Mars is about 50 million miles farther away from the Sun than Earth. That means it gets a lot less light and heat to keep it warm. Can humans live in Mars? Yet the fact remains that the astronauts will be unable to live on Mars except in very restricted conditions. They will have to stay inside their capsules, inside a base or inside their spacesuits. Mars is not suited to human visitors. But can we change this? What is Mars famous for? Mars is known as the red planet because iron minerals in the Martian soil oxidize, or rust, causing the soil and atmosphere to look red. Why is Mars so interesting? Searching for life on Mars. Mars is an excellent place to investigate this question because it is the most similar planet to Earth in the solar system. Evidence suggests that Mars was once full of water, warmer and had a thicker atmosphere, offering a potentially habitable environment. Does Mars have oxygen? According to ESA, Mars' atmosphere is composed of 95.32% carbon dioxide, 2.7% nitrogen, 1.6% argon and 0.13% oxygen. The atmospheric pressure at the surface is 6.35 bar, which is over 100 times less Earth's. Humans therefore cannot breathe Martian. How long is one day on Mars? Image of how long is one day on Mars. 1d 0 hours 37 minutes. Mars/length of day. Mars is a planet with a very similar daily cycle to the Earth. Its sidereal day is 24 hours, 37 minutes and 22 seconds, and its solar day 24 hours, 39 minutes and 35 seconds. A Martian day, referred to as sol, is therefore approximately 40 minutes longer than a day on Earth. Can you breathe on Mars? Mars does have an atmosphere, but it is about 100 times thinner than Earth's atmosphere and it has very little oxygen. The atmosphere on Mars is made up of mainly carbon dioxide. An astronaut on Mars would not be able to breathe the Martian air and would need a spacesuit with oxygen to work outdoors. Does it rain on Mars? Mars is drier and colder than Earth, and in consequence dust raised by these winds tends to remain in the atmosphere longer than on Earth as there is no precipitation to wash it out, excepting CO2 snowfall. Why does Mars have 2 moons? The moons of Mars may have started with a huge collision with a protoplanet 1/3 the mass of Mars that formed a ring around Mars. The inner part of the ring formed a large moon. Gravitational interactions between this moon and the outer ring formed Phobos and Deimos. What is Mars made of? Mars is differentiated, which, for a terrestrial planet, implies that it has a central core made up of high-density matter, mainly metallic iron and nickel, surrounded by a less dense, silicate mantle and crust. Like Earth, Mars appears to have a molten iron core, or at least a molten outer core. Who visited Mars first? The first NASA spacecraft to reach Mars was Mariner 4. Launched on November 28, 1964, Mariner 4 began its brief encounter with Mars on July 14, 1965. It took 22 pictures of the Martian surface from a distance of over 9,677 kilometers, 6,000 miles. Electronic data was sent back to JPL and was reconstructed into visual images. How long is a year on Mars? Image of how long is a year on Mars? 687 days. Mars/orbital period. The Earth zips around the Sun at about 67,000 miles per hour, making a full revolution in about 365 days, 1 year on Earth. Mars is a little slower, and farther from the Sun, so a full circuit takes 687 Earth days, or 1 Mars year. That longer year means longer seasons too. Can we see Mars from Earth? When Mars and Earth are close to each other, Mars appears very bright in our sky. It is also easier to see with telescopes or the naked eye. Is Mars older than the Earth? Previous studies based on these rocks had suggested that Mars had largely formed 2 to 4 million years after the start of the solar system. Earth, by comparison, formed after about 60 million years. Is there any water on Mars? Taking what can be detected directly by spacecraft, scientists estimate that the measurable total of Martian water, in other words, its hydrosphere, is about 30 meters, 100 feet, gl. Nearly all of this lies in the polar caps and region. Atmospheric water contributes only a negligible trace. Can we live on Mars? Mars might not be somewhere we could live. We are not sure how effective Mars's atmosphere would be as a radiation shield. How will astronauts hide from radiation on Mars? And we must remember that the explorers will have to spend a long time on the planet. There can be no quick there and back dash, as with the Moon. Is Mars bigger than the Earth? Mars' diameter 6,790 kilometers is only slightly more than half the size of Earth diameter 12,750 kilometers.